Shocking truth exposed. Millionaire stunned by the 3 amazing secrets hidden in the janitor's home. Marcus Reynolds, the self-proclaimed champ of Maplewood, thought he had it all: a sprawling mansion, a sleek car, a schedule packed with mentoring young entrepreneurs. But with each successful deal, the weight of a hollow existence crept heavier. On this clear autumn afternoon, curiosity propelled him through the older neighborhoods, where pre-war homes whispered stories of lives once filled with struggle. And then he saw it. An abandoned house, its paint peeling, windows cracked. It stood defiantly against the manicured lawns around it. The worn path leading up to the front door called out to him, stirring echoes of his own journey from rags to riches. There was an unusual pull to this place, an inexplicable connection he couldn't ignore. He shook off the unsettling thoughts as he knocked on the door, but no answer came. Marcus peered through the grime-coated window and caught a glimpse of barely legible words scrawled on an ancient manuscript resting atop a desk. Who once dreamed here? Suddenly, guilt washed over him like cold water on a hot day. He remembered Jim, the quiet janitor of Maplewood High, always smiling, always there, yet effortlessly invisible. Marcus's mind raced with memories of his unrecognized childhood victories, lost under the shadow of wealth and success. Inside, he felt an unfamiliar pang. Here stood dreams, much like his, but hidden behind the mask of neglect. As he turned away from the window, lingering remnants of Jim's legacy sparked a moral dilemma. Should he dig deeper into this prospective treasure trove? With visions of the innovative patents stuffed in rotting drawers and a diary rich with untold tales, his palms began to sweat. They could propel his investments and bolster his already affluent empire. But at what cost? Jim deserved to know, to take pride in his ancestors' brilliance, not have their legacy used as mere fodder for Marcus's financial gain. Determining the weight of this choice swirled inside him, lighting a fuse of desperation and anxiety. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every passing second, anguish gnawed at his insides. Could he unravel this family's narrative and take the spoils for himself? Or would he risk his fortune in a reckless act of empathy? Marcus clenched his fists, clouds of apprehension racing in his mind as he pondered his next steps.
He could reach out to Jim, the kind man who wore humility like armor, or choose to shield himself behind the allure of potential profit. The air felt electric as he stood before that dilapidated house, grappling with the specter of his own success. Memories of his family's sacrifices played in slow motion before him, the late nights, the missed opportunities. Each fleeting moment weighed heavily on his conscience, intertwining his ambitions with the burden of duty. Just as he steeled himself to approach the old door, a distinct sound broke the silence, a clatter, perhaps a shift of forgotten history. He hesitated. What lay beyond that entrance could illuminate his path forward or drown him in regret. The choice loomed larger than life itself. In that moment, time stood still, urging him closer as he braced for the first step into the unknown. Would the ghosts of the past redefine his future, or would he slip deeper into the chasm of ambition? Marcus felt an invisible force coaxing him toward the door, a longing intermingled with dread. The sound that echoed from within was a tangible reminder of the lives lived in this house, a kaleidoscope of hopes and dreams abandoned in time. It was as if the building itself was challenging him to confront his own history. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, urging him to act, not just for himself, but for the man whose legacy lay in tatters, the very man he had overlooked for years. He took a deep breath, the crisp autumn air invigorating, yet heavy with the scent of decay. As he finally reached for the doorknob, doubts wrestled for dominance in his mind. Should he venture into the remnants of a life that once thrived? What if there were memories embedded in those walls that were never meant to be unearthed? Every step closer felt like a defiance against his current life, a gamble between greed and moral integrity. Within moments, the door creaked open, revealing an interior cloaked in shadows. Dust particles danced in the slivers of sunlight that poured through the grimy windows. The urge to explore merged with a sense of reverence for all this house had contained. Marcus stepped inside, the floorboards moaning underfoot, and a shot of adrenaline coursed through him. The thrill was intoxicating, not just because of the potential for riches, but because he was at the cusp of something bigger than himself. Scanning the room, Marcus's eyes landed on a cluttered desk, papers strewn haphazardly across its surface. One document in particular caught his attention. With trembling hands he picked it up, his heart racing as he read the faded ink. It was a blueprint for an invention, a mechanical aid that could have changed lives in its time. The realization hit him hard. This was the legacy Jim's family had fought to protect. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of its importance seep into his consciousness.
This was not merely an opportunity for profit. This document could hold the key to revitalizing an inventor's forgotten tale, a chance to give Jim something back. Excitement flashed within him, but a deep-rooted conflict raged just beneath the surface. Where does moral obligation end and ambition begin? This was not a mere financial transaction. It was a doorway to create meaning from something real and profound. But did he have the courage to share this with Jim? Wouldn't doing so expose Marcus not just to vulnerability, but to the possibility of rejection from someone who had long remained beneath his radar? The discomfort swelled until it felt unbearable. The architect of his wealth had hidden stories and sacrifices he had never cared to uncover. As he turned back towards the entrance, the floor shifted beneath him once more, causing him to stumble. His breath quickened. Perhaps the very house was pushing him towards a decision, urging him away from the slippery slopes of self-interest. He knew that stepping out of this threshold meant facing his fears, not just for himself, but for Jim, the very embodiment of resilience and hard work. He could live in his mansion, surrounded by wealth, or he could step into the messy, raw reality of existence that had eluded him for too long. Marcus glanced one last time at the blueprint before placing it carefully back on the desk. This was just a fragment of a much larger whole. With resolution blooming within him, he exited the house and walked down the path, his mind racing with plans. It wasn't about the chase for riches anymore. It engaged a deeper need for connection and purpose. Marcus's heart pulsed with newfound determination. He would approach Jim and put the wheels in motion to honor his legacy. One conversation might lead to a revelation that could alter not only their lives, but the lives of countless others who had carried similar burdens. As Marcus reached the end of the path, ready to forge ahead, he could barely contain the burgeoning anticipation. He wasn't merely heading back to the comfort of his mansion. He was embarking on a journey of authenticity. But could he unearth the truth of Jim's past without shattering the very fabric of that hidden life? The moment had come to face not just Jim, but the echoes of his own history. What awaited him at the other side of this confrontation? As Marcus made his way back, the sun dipped lower in the horizon, casting long, haunting shadows that mirrored the turmoil in his mind. With each step, his thoughts spun with a blend of trepidation and resolution. What was he preparing for? The anticipation should have felt thrilling, but instead it churned within him like an impending storm. Jim was not just a custodian of a forgotten invention. He symbolized a bridge between Marcus's past and a potentially transformative future. He entered his mansion, the familiar modernity of sleek lines and polished surfaces, contrasting sharply with the decaying echoes of the house he'd just left. The walls, adorned with contemporary art pieces, felt more like a barrier now, cutting him off from the messy reality he had just stepped away from. It wasn't just the physical space that felt cold, but the realization that he had created a fortress around himself, insulated from the very vulnerabilities that made life authentic. Marcus stepped into his home office, the space that was a monument to his achievements. Yet today, surrounded by accolades and degrees, he felt a nagging emptiness. As he sat down at his mahogany desk, the blueprint loomed large in his mind, a tether to a richer narrative, one filled with grit, ambition, and stories of struggle that his intellect had so callously bypassed until now. He thought about Jim's weary visage, the lines etched deep from years of hardship. That face had weathered a life he had remained blissfully ignorant of, a life where an innovator's dreams had slipped away like grains of sand. A series of questions flooded his mind. How could a man like Jim exist in his world without him ever knowing?
Why had he disassociated himself from those who worked tirelessly behind the scenes, making his lifestyle possible? Each consideration felt like a challenge to his identity. He prided himself on being a self-made man, yet here he was confronted by the stark reality that success often came at the cost of others' sacrifices. Beneath his prosperity lay a troubling truth. He had chosen his narrative carefully, cultivating an image of triumph while ignoring the very ecosystem that enriched it. He grabbed a pen and paper, the act both grounding and liberating. It was time to articulate his thoughts, channeling them into a cohesive plan to reconnect with Jim and unveil the legacy hidden in that blueprint. Would Jim even want to explore this path alongside him? Perhaps the weight of burdens long carried might lead to reluctance or outright refusal, fear mingling with pride. There was, after all, no clear pathway to restore what was lost. And there it was, the catalyst he needed. His venture was not driven by the idea of profit, but by the elusive prospect of reclamation. What if it was indeed possible to reignite Jim's dream, not merely for financial gain, but as a testament to perseverance in the face of adversity? Marcus's decisiveness solidified as he envisioned their conversation. Outlining a potential meeting, he felt the pang of vulnerability, but also an exhilarating urge to dismantle the walls of his insular existence. Just as clarity began to settle in, an unsettling thought disrupted his focus. What if Jim questioned his motives? What if, in the act of revealing this legacy, he had unknowingly chained Jim to his ambitions once again?
With that fresh dilemma, the rush of inspiration mingled with the specter of doubt, unraveling the firm grasp he thought he had on this endeavor. But this wasn't just any opportunity to confront someone else's truth. It mirrored his own uncertainties and fears of confronting vulnerability. Marcus understood this was a threshold, one demanding not just courage but also sincerity. The path forward would not merely affect Jim, but redefine who Marcus was and could be. As he prepared to reach out, the weight of the moment settled. The hope for rebirth mingled with the fear of disappointment. But this time he would move forward without defensiveness. The question loomed large. Could he truly embrace the messy implications of Jim's history, or would he retreat into the comfort of wealth and distance? And as night fell, Marcus was left staring into the unknown, wrestling with both internal and external confrontations that awaited him. Tomorrow would deliver the moment of truth, standing right at the precipice of change. Would he possess the fortitude to step into that meeting and confront his own past alongside Jim's? The morning light seeped into Marcus's office, illuminating the papers on his desk, yet it felt like a shroud rather than a beacon. His stomach knotted with anticipation, an unsettling mixture of dread and eagerness. The clock ticked louder as the meeting time approached, its rhythmic sound amplifying the doubts swirling in his mind. He had prepared extensively, rehearsing scenarios and questions, but beneath it all, a gnawing fear lingered. Would Jim see through the surface of his intentions? As he gathered his thoughts, the cold detachment of his past life hung around him like a heavy cloak. Success had taught him to be a strategist. It had sharpened his instincts to recognize opportunities, but it had also dulled his ability to connect. Did he genuinely want to make amends, or was he simply seeking validation? The duality pressed heavily on his conscience. Determined to strip away the apprehensions, Marcus took a moment to visualize the conversation he hoped to have with Jim. He imagined Jim's tired eyes lighting up at the mention of the blueprint. Success was not about mere financial gain. It was about fostering rekindled dreams, renewing forgotten ambitions. But he wondered again, how could he convey that sincerity convincingly? The thought of communicating his intentions began to take form. He would have to reveal the personal stakes in this endeavor, not just the desire to rebuild Jim's legacy, but to unearth and confront his own. The idea felt daunting. Could he truly expose his vulnerabilities to a man he had previously disregarded? When he arrived at the old workshop that had once been Jim's sanctuary, a wave of nostalgia and regret washed over him. Memories danced in the air, and they were not all his. They were remnants of unfulfilled promises and dreams never pursued.
Marcus's heart raced in his chest as he took in the disarray, the dust that shrouded the past. This was a physical manifestation of his own neglect. Jim appeared, weary but solemnly dignified. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment the world around them paused. Marcus could sense the history between them, a shared silence thick with stories left untold.
With each passing second, he felt the weight of his convictions sharpening. He needed to take the first step. "Jim," he called, voice steady yet tinged with urgency. "I've been thinking about what you wanted to achieve, about the dreams that have lingered in these walls." Jim's guarded expression betrayed little, and that uncertainty pressed against the walls of Marcus's resolve. He took a breath, aware that the words tumbling forth had the power to either bridge the chasm between them or erect it further. I understand now that my success came from people like you, from sacrifices that I overlooked," he admitted. "I've decided I want to help revive your vision, together." The silence that followed was enveloping. Jim's face was inscrutable, but Marcus could feel the tension, curiosity battling skepticism. Did Jim perceive this as a genuine offer or merely more empty words from a privileged stranger? As they stood in the specter of history and possibility, Marcus sensed the severity of his next words. He needed to be raw, transparent about his past ignorance, his immense privilege, and the chasm it had created. "I need to face my own ignorance, too. There's a lot I've taken for granted, and it's time I understood what your dreams mean." Jim's brow furrowed deeper, a glimmer of emotion flickering just below the surface. The barriers around him may have begun to crack, but Marcus remained acutely aware. He was still a stranger to Jim's world, a world that had flourished without him. Then, the unexpected hit him like a tidal wave. What if this well-intentioned effort led Jim to see Marcus as an incompetent fool who had wasted considerable time while others persevered? What if in seeking redemption he uncovered an irreparable rift instead? The point of no return had arrived. Marcus recognized that either choice would reflect fundamental truths about who he was willing to become, but without clearing the air, he would remain stuck in the past, a prisoner of his own affluence and inaction. Could he redefine his identity through this connection, or would he only reaffirm the distance he yearned to close? With the tension in the air palpable, Marcus prepared to confront his own history, but now a new reality loomed before him. What if confronting the past meant unearthing secrets that tied their fates together in ways he had never anticipated? The moment was at hand, and all that remained was to embrace whatever truth Jim would reveal. What awaited them in this exchange amidst the remnants of dreams past? As the silence stretched, Marcus felt the weight of truth pressing down upon him.
The workshop's walls held stories. Every scratch on the wooden surface of the workbench, every faded poster on the wall, whispered of aspirations caught in time. This was Jim's world, and in that moment, Marcus realized he had stepped into a gallery of dreams that had not been realized, a place where his own ambitions flickered like out-of-reach stars. "Why now?" Jim's voice broke the stillness, laced with skepticism. "Why come back after all this time?" Marcus swallowed hard, the tension in his throat reflective of the uncertainty flooding his thoughts. "Because I want to make this right," he replied, forcing his voice to remain steady. "I can't undo the past, but I can help us build something new." "Something new?" Jim echoed, arms crossing defensively. His eyes narrowed. "What, another failed promise from the one who left when things got tough?" The accusation struck deeper than Marcus anticipated. He had anticipated some resistance, but this raw anger felt personal, like a mirror reflecting his own fears and failures. "I know I've hurt you," he admitted. "I can't change what I did before, but I'm ready to work alongside you. I want to listen, to learn." "Listen, learn?" Jim scoffed, resentment simmering beneath the surface. "What do you know of hard work? You've built a life on privilege, while I've fought tooth and nail just to survive. You can't waltz in here and act as if I owe you the chance to try again." It was a fair point. Marcus felt the sharp sting of truth in Jim's words. He opened his mouth to argue, but found himself searching for a different response, one that demonstrated his willingness to own his shortcomings, not deflect them. "You're right. I don't know what it means to struggle in the same way you do. But maybe that's why I'm here. I need to understand the journey that brought you here, the dreams that were abandoned, and the sacrifices that were made." With that, a flicker of contemplation crossed Jim's features. The anger didn't disappear, but it softened ever so slightly. "You think understanding will change anything? It won't bring back lost years." "No, it won't," Marcus admitted quietly. "But I can't move forward without knowing the past. I need to confront it, not just for your sake, but for my own. If I can't understand where I failed, how can I hope to succeed with you?" For a heartbeat, they shared a charged glance, and Marcus felt the undulating currents of their separate histories colliding in the space around them. The air crackled with the weight of possibility, but uncertainty still loomed over them like a storm cloud. "What if I show you?
Jim finally said, his voice weary but tinged with a hint of curiosity. "What if I take you through that history? Can you even bear it?" Marcus felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. While the prospect of poring over his flaws felt daunting, it was the path before him. "Yes, I need to bear it for my own growth. I won't hide from what I've done."
Jim narrowed his eyes again, probing for weakness. "This isn't a reconciliation, Marcus. It's an exposure, an uncovering. Do you believe you have what it takes to face the truth?" Determined, Marcus nodded slowly. "I do. No more running. Please, let me understand." What came next would require more than just words. It would call for bravery as they tread into the territory of shared pain and regret. As Jim hesitated, Marcus realized he was standing on the precipice of a revelation that could irrevocably alter the course of their lives, both professionally and personally. With one final look at Jim, something shifted in the room, charging the air with unspoken tension and anticipation. Between them lay the ability to confront hidden truths, but it was a dangerous journey that awaited them both. Marcus wondered what truths Jim was harboring, secrets that could reshape everything he thought he knew. As the weight of their collective past loomed larger, Marcus sensed the overlooked dreams stirring once more. Would Jim's revelations lead to collaboration or destruction? The path remained obscured, and the responsibility for the outcome rested heavier than before. Would he be ready when the truth was finally exposed, or would it shatter everything they hoped to build anew? Marcus took a steadying breath as Jim's quiet contemplation lingered in the air, thickening like fog around them. The workshop felt both oppressive and liberating, a paradox of familiarity and estrangement. He had walked away from opportunities before, but now a compelling urge pushed him forward. It drove him to embrace the darkness without knowing what it might reveal. "Fine. You want to understand? Come," Jim said finally, his voice low but firm. He turned away from Marcus, his movements brisk but cautious, suggesting a reluctance laced with an unexpected curiosity. The workshop door creaked as it opened, and the musty scent of aged wood mixed with oil and metal wafted into the slightly fresher air outside. Marcus followed, his heart drumming in rhythm with an unsteady beat of both dread and anticipation. As they stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the ground. There was a stark contrast between the brightness of day and the weight of their past, a visual metaphor that Marcus felt threading through his thoughts. Would they walk into the light of understanding or remain trapped in their own shadows? "Let's start where it all began," Jim said, walking briskly towards a dilapidated building at the edge of the lot, a remnant from better times that echoed lost potential, much like their own relationship. Marcus observed the peeling paint, the cracked windows, and the overgrown weeds that claimed the space with an undeniable ferocity, the evidence of neglect that mirrored the dreams both of them had allowed to wither. As they reached the entrance, Jim pushed the door open. A cloud of dust erupted, revealing a space once vibrant and alive with possibilities. Scattered tools lay abandoned, and cobwebs curled in the corners like forgotten memories. "This was intended to be our workshop," Jim murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before, you know." Marcus felt the rush of regret flooding through him, every ounce of it palpable. "I thought we could build something better together," he ventured, his throat tight with unexpressed sorrow for the time lost and the promises broken. "I failed you. I left when you needed me the most." Jim's gaze hardened, but there was something else, a flicker of understanding. "Do you think losing this place meant anything to you? You knew nothing of struggle. You had everything handed to you. I had to claw for air," he snapped. But his words were no longer as laced with venom. They were grounded in a shared reality. "That's why I need to feel it, to understand it," Marcus pressed, stepping forward, forcing himself to hold Jim's stern gaze. "If we are to build something together, I need to know every struggle you faced. I can no longer be an outsider looking in." Jim studied him, as if weighing the sincerity of his commitment. He took a deep breath as he began to sift through the remnants of their shared history. "All right, let's start with the first cut. A job we lost because of my misjudgment. It echoed through everything since." As Jim began to recount the tale, detailing the sleepless nights spent questioning every decision, every resource mismanaged, Marcus listened intently, his heart heavy with the weight of struggle and resilience. By offering Jim his undivided attention, he began to dismantle the walls that isolated them, brick by strained brick. Yet within the unfolding story, Marcus realized a critical truth. In acknowledging Jim's pain, he also unearthed his own buried regrets. Each word revealed not just Jim's struggle, but the consequences of Marcus's own actions.
the abandonment that tormented him more than he'd ever admitted. As Jim's voice pulled them deeper into the past, Marcus felt a shift within himself, the echoes of lost dreams transforming into the seeds of understanding. The ground was shifting beneath him, but he remained rooted in determination. To emerge as allies rather than ghosts of the past, they would need to face even darker corners of their histories. Suddenly, Jim paused mid-sentence, tension crackling in the air, a sign that a pivotal moment was approaching. "I never spoke about this to anyone. Can you handle what happened next?" Jim asked, the challenge in his eyes daring Marcus to retreat or rise. In that instant, Marcus recognized the potential for both revelation and rupture. The path forward was unclear, but there was no turning back. "I'm ready," Marcus asserted, steeling himself for the unveiling of truths that could shatter everything he thought he knew. As Jim began to speak again, Marcus sensed the atmosphere shifting.
What deeper truths would emerge? What further weight would they bear together? The air hung thick with anticipation, a palpable tension that buzzed between them as Jim gathered his thoughts, visibly wrestling with the ghosts that haunted him. Marcus felt the urge to reach out, to anchor them both against the vortex of memories that threatened to spiral into chaos. Instead, he held himself steady, knowing that this moment could redefine everything. "Everything changed after that job," Jim finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes momentarily distant as if he were revisiting a painful dream. "I tried to compensate for my mistakes, but it spiraled further out of control. I thought if I worked harder, I could turn it around." Marcus leaned in, eager to grasp the full extent of Jim's experience. "But what happened?" he asked, his voice surprisingly steady, fueled by a growing resolve to truly understand. "The second job was a bigger opportunity, one I wouldn't have dared to dream about before. We were supposed to impress a potential investor, but I hesitated. I had this nagging fear that haunted me. What if they found out about the first mess-up?" Jim's eyes flickered back to Marcus, vulnerability cracking the tough exterior he consistently presented. "I threw us into a rush project to mask my fear. It was reckless." As the story unfolded, Marcus felt each revelation hit him like a hammer. Jim's misjudgments weren't merely simple errors. They were rooted in a deeper turmoil, one that stemmed from abandonment and the weight of expectations. The realization stirred something inside Marcus, a clarity about his own reactions, his own failures that had plagued him for years. "In the end," Jim continued, his voice thickening with emotion, "we lost that contract, and our reputation took a dive. I had pushed us into chaos, trying to stave off my demons by conquering a challenge without fully trusting the process or the people around me." A knot formed in Marcus's throat as he began to see himself in Jim's narrative. It echoed the moments when fear of inadequacy had caused him to retreat rather than confront problems head-on. He had chosen comfort over conflict, leaving behind opportunities that now felt like shadows of guilt encroaching on his resolve. "Jim, I never truly understood the pressure you were under," Marcus admitted, his conviction growing. "I was so focused on my fears, my need to escape, that I didn't consider yours. I need to work through this with you. I can't just be a bystander anymore." Jim's expression shifted, no longer a mask of defensiveness, but a blend of surprise and cautious hope. "You're willing to face the mess we made, after all this time?" Marcus nodded, a newfound determination coursing through him. "Absolutely. I'm already a part of this mess, whether I like it or not. Understanding your battles is the only way I can confront my own."
He could feel the walls beginning to crack as they shared their stories, a partnership in vulnerability, building on the foundation of honesty. This was far from comfortable, but the rawness of their reparations felt transformative. As Jim took a deep breath, Marcus recognized the shared weight between them, like a heavy anchor that had now begun to shift. "Then we need to dig deeper," Jim replied, resolve firming his tone. "What I haven't told you yet is that our past mistakes aren't isolated. They tie back to people I trusted, people who let me down badly." The implications of Jim's words sank into Marcus's mind like stones, heartening the resolve in his chest. He had once considered his life unscathed, isolated from darker currents that influenced Jim, but now it dawned on him. The choices they made were interdependent, leading both down a path of disappointment and regret. "Who?" Marcus couldn't help but ask, a sense of urgency pushing him forward.
Who let you down? Jim frowned, wrestling with the ghosts of their past. An old mentor, someone I trusted blindly. When I needed guidance, he vanished. The air shifted again, thickening with tension as Jim's eyes hardened with a mix of resentment and pain. And that is where it all began. His betrayal led me to chasing validation at all costs. Feeling the depth of Jim's anguish for the first time, Marcus understood that this wasn't merely about past mistakes anymore. This was about facing those who had wronged them, a reckoning that would involve digging into the shadows once and for all. As they both stood on the edge of this chasm of history and regret, Marcus knew they were teetering on the precipice of a revelation that could not only redefine their partnership, but could also set fire to the very foundation of their futures. With a furtive glance, Jim finally spoke up, the challenge layered in his words like fine silk over brass knuckles. "Are you sure you can handle what that means?" "More than ever," Marcus replied, a fierce determination lighting his gaze. "Let's unravel it together." With those words, the bonds of their friendship reached a pivotal breaking point, one that would either unite them in understanding or scatter them further into their respective shadows. The stage was set for a confrontation that could alter the trajectory of both their lives. What lay ahead was unknown, and Marcus felt exhilarated and terrified in equal measure. He was ready for the confrontation to come, but what would he discover about himself next? Marcus felt a tremor ripple through him as he considered Jim's words. The promise of delving deeper into past betrayals held an intensity he neither desired nor could ignore. The prospect excited him, and yet a persistent voice whispered doubts. What truths might emerge from the shadows? What would they reveal about themselves? "Let's start with that mentor," Marcus suggested, his voice firm.
He could feel a swell of energy building within him, curiosity mingling with a sense of responsibility. "What did he teach you, and where did it all begin to unravel?" Jim's face grew contemplative. He was everything, a guiding light, a soundboard. I believed in him completely. The way he effortlessly maneuvered the business world, the way he spoke, they were intoxicating. Marcus leaned forward, entranced. The story felt like a revelation. It painted a portrait of longing entwined with regret. But in the end, what was that intoxication worth when he left you hanging? The mask was torn away, and I was left in the dark. The bitterness in Jim's tone was palpable, his eyes narrowing as if recalling each betrayal with vivid clarity. When I needed support, he disappeared. I was desperate to impress him, to show that I was worthy, but when it truly mattered, he just vanished. As Jim spoke, Marcus's thoughts flickered like a series of images. He had grasped at validation too, chased accolades while ignoring his authentic self. The fear of inadequacy loomed over him as well. That must have felt like a betrayal not just from him but from yourself too. The realization that it wasn't just about failing a project, but rather being misled by someone you trusted. "Exactly," Jim responded, his voice gaining strength. "That realization drove me to that reckless decision. I'd covered my fear with bravado, thinking if I could just chase bigger opportunities I'd reclaim what I lost, but it only led me into deeper chaos." Marcus weighed Jim's words, piecing together the profound connection between their experiences. They were part of a cycle, caught in a loop fed by external validation and the shadows of betrayal. "Do you think we've both been chasing shadows our entire lives?" he murmured, the introspection rolling heavy in the air. "Perhaps," Jim offered, uncertainty flickering across his face. "But confronting it is the only way forward, right? It's about understanding what drove us down these paths." "True," Marcus agreed, a new determination igniting as he considered the transformative potential within reckoning. "But it goes beyond understanding. We need to confront the consequences, not just for ourselves, but for those affected by our decisions, including the people we love." An unexpected spark of clarity ignited in him. This wasn't just about unearthing the past. It was about learning, evolving, and operationalizing their newfound insights for the future. With each passing moment, he found himself fueled by a sense of enlightenment, ready to wield understanding as a weapon against their shared demons. "It's not merely about acknowledgement, it's about actionable change." The assertion felt revolutionary as it left his lips. "We have to challenge the patterns we've fallen into. That means confronting those who have wronged us, not hiding from them." Jim nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. "Then we seek him out."
If he's the catalyst for this mess, we owe it to ourselves to face him. The notion hung in the air, weighted with significance.
They were standing at the threshold of a confrontation that could reshape their futures. There remained an anxiety underneath the flurry of resolve. A fading picture of who they used to be seemed to weave between their aspirations. "Let's do it," Marcus concluded, a fierce edge of excitement threading through his voice. "Let's find closure, and in the process, discover who we are without the burdens of our past." As they exchanged determined glances, the atmosphere shifted. The barriers that had kept them apart began to dissolve. It was time to move forward, together, into the echoing depths of confrontation. The unknown loomed before them, each step forward stitching together paths to a forgotten clarity, a cleansing flame awaiting both understanding and resolution. With renewed focus, they prepared to undertake a journey into the heart of their doubts, the reckoning with the mentor who had become the ghost haunting their professional aspirations. But as they stepped toward this confrontation, a new realization formed in Marcus's mind. What if the mentor wasn't the only one who needed to be confronted? What if deeper secrets lay between them, rooted in their disparity journeys? Each revelation brought them closer to a truth, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that uncovering one mystery would only lead to another. Little did they know, the real confrontation was yet to begin. The day of reckoning crept closer, a weight heavy on Marcus' shoulders as he met Jim outside the small cafe they'd chosen for refuge. The air buzzed with the anticipation of change. Flashes of memories ignited moments of doubt, yet the flicker of excitement overshadowed his trepidation. As they settled into their seats, Marcus felt the need to maintain their focus sharp and clear. "Do you think you're ready for this?" he asked, a slight edge of concern evident in his tone. His gaze bore into Jim, searching for any hint of retreat. "I mean, really ready?" Jim's expression was a kaleidoscope of resolve and fear. "It's not about being ready, Marcus. It's about being brave enough to act even if we feel unprepared." Marcus nodded, knowing Jim was right, but struggling with the still looming uncertainties. They were both aware that confronting their pasts meant peeling back layers of shame and disappointment that had been festering for years. It was one thing to speak of courage, and quite another to face the source of that chaos. The comforting hum of coffee machines and clattering dishes faded into the background as he turned within. He had spent countless hours cloaked in excuses, drowning his insecurities in work while pushing relationships to the brink. No longer could he afford the luxury of avoiding painful truths. The moment had come for an inventory of his own grievances, the missed opportunities for connection.
"What if we find out more than we bargained for?" Marcus asked quietly, voice tempered with doubt. "Then we learn to deal with it," Jim replied. Confidence radiated from him, grounding Marcus in the shared mission of understanding together. No more running, no more complicity in our own failures. That assertion ignited a pulse of defiance in Marcus. He realized the strength they could offer each other, a mutual scaffolding built through shared visions of accountability and growth. The memories of their mentor became less about past glories and more about their intertwined fates. "Do you think he has any idea the impact he's had on our lives?" Marcus questioned, visualizing the mentor's insufferable arrogance, his seemingly endless guidance that had borne only hollow fruits. "Some people can't see the destruction they leave behind," Jim replied, an unmistakable bitterness seeping into his voice. "But we can. We can be the change he avoided." In that moment, clarity washed over Marcus. He realized that confronting the mentor was about more than reckoning with a disappointing figure from their past. It was a catalyst for personal transformation. They could reshape their narratives, no longer defined by betrayal, but by the strength born from true understanding. Yet the stakes were higher than just a confrontation. Something more lurked beneath the surface, an underlying current of their shared history. Questions sparked in his mind, urging him to dig deeper. A part of him worried that their unity could fracture under the weight of unearthing buried secrets, both personal and professional. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Jim's phone buzzed violently, jolting Marcus from his thoughts. Jim glanced at the screen, brows furrowing. "It's him," he said, as a swirl of fear ignited in the air. The gravity of their mission settled heavily in the pit of Marcus's stomach, and awareness settling that this wasn't merely a meeting. This was about uncovering truths that could change their narrative of their lives forever. "What do we do?" "Face it," Jim said resolutely, and with firm strides,
They stepped into the uncertain path ahead. The destination loomed large, an impending confrontation that threatened to unravel the very foundations of their identities. As they walked, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something monumental. What if, within this reckoning, lay not just redemption, but a revelation about themselves that could shatter everything they thought they knew? The weight of impending truths pressed against them as the first steps into the unknown began to ripple towards inevitable confrontation. The time had come to unmask not just the mentor, but perhaps themselves. Stepping into the small office occupied by Maximilian Burns, the mentor who had cast a long shadow over their lives, Marcus felt the tension coil in the air.
The disheveled walls, adorned with accolades from a time when everything seemed so simple, whispered stories of brilliance tinged with betrayal. As they positioned themselves on either side of Maximilian's desk, the air was charged with anticipation. This was more than just a meeting. It was the confrontation they had been building toward. Maximilian looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and smug satisfaction. "Marcus, Jim, what brings you both here together after all these years?" His voice was smooth, yet Marcus could sense an undercurrent of arrogance lurking just beneath the surface. "We're here to talk about the past," Jim asserted, his tone resolute. "About the decisions you made that affected us both. We need to understand the impact of your mentorship, or absence of it." Maximilian leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You've done well for yourselves, haven't you? What's there to discuss? It's time to move on, boys." A surge of anger bubbled within Marcus, but he would not be swayed by arrogance. "We're not here for pleasantries or to defend our choices. We want to confront you about what you left us with. Your mistakes cost us years of our lives, our careers. Your disappearances taught us to dodge responsibility." The look on Maximilian's face shifted subtly, a mixture of defensiveness and disbelief. "I don't owe you, either of you, an explanation. The business world is cutthroat. You thrive or perish. You both chose to pursue your own paths. And we've learned the hard way the cost of that chase," Jim interjected, standing resolute. "You were supposed to guide us, but instead you abandoned us at a critical moment. Why?" Maximilian's eyes gleamed as he leaned forward. "I didn't owe you loyalty. I offered knowledge. If you couldn't handle the fallout of your own actions, that's not on me." In that moment, Marcus recognized the ugly truth laid bare before them. Their mentor's perspective would never change. He had effectively trapped them in cycles of doubt and inadequacy without ever acknowledging his own failures. But it also illuminated a different path, a chance for them to rewrite their own narratives. "As you say, this is a ruthless world," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "But we are no longer victims of your negligence. Jim and I have confronted our failures and learned from them. We are ready to build a future free from shadows like yours." The tension in the room tightened. Jim glanced at Marcus, his expression reflecting a mix of anger and newfound determination. "You've done nothing but sow discord, Maximilian. But understand this, we will reclaim what you tried to take from us." Maximilian's composure faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly masked it with a patronizing smile. "Good luck, boys, but you should know, the road ahead is littered with far more peril than you faced here." "Peril is where growth begins," Marcus said, resolve solidifying within him. "You taught us to navigate treacherous waters through your example. Now we can embrace the struggle instead of shying away." As they rose from the meeting, Marcus felt a sense of liberation breaking through. The confrontation had not only exposed their mentor's shortcomings, but it also culminated in something much more significant, a renewed bond between him and Jim, cemented through shared adversity. Walking out into the sunlight, everything felt different, lighter almost. "That felt cathartic," Marcus said, casting a glance toward Jim. "We faced the ghosts of our pasts and emerged stronger." "Exactly. We finally take control," Jim replied, his expression transformed. "We can shape our own futures without the weight of his failures dragging us down." Feeling like champions of their own destinies, they turned to face each other, each filled with unshakable confidence. This was not just the end of old conflicts, it was the birth of a new chapter. They had both overcome barriers through their confrontations, recognizing failures, embracing vulnerability, and seizing control over their futures. The path ahead was theirs to carve, to rekindle the spirit of collaboration and innovation that had been lost for far too long. With renewed purpose, they would not only return Jim's forgotten dreams to light, but they would create a cohesive vision, one that marked a legacy forged from resilience and friendship. As they stepped away from that chapter, Marcus felt a reassuring sense of achievement. The burdens once carried had transformed into stepping stones. No longer swayed by external validation, they now stood at an intersection of possibility, ready to conquer whatever lay ahead. This was the beginning of not just their professional resurrection, but their unwavering commitment to authenticity in all aspects of life. It was time to embrace a future built on newfound wisdom, honesty, and the promise of true collaboration between equals. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Marcus realized he had stepped into a world of clarity, confidence, and success. This was the moment he had yearned for. He had overcome the shadows of greed and ignorance, achieving a grounded sense of purpose in the wake of confrontation. Now he and Jim were poised to share their story, a testament that would resonate far beyond their pasts. It was time to inspire others to rise and reclaim their own narratives. Before Marcus got lost in dreams of the future, he felt an undeniable urge to connect this moment with all of you. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.
Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.